The plague came without warning. On the morning of the third day of the growing season, the first collapsed in the streets of city. By evening, thousands more had fallen. By the end of the week, the hospitals were full. By the end of the month, the hospitals had become morgues. They were a peaceful species. They looked like tall insects, with 4 arms and large compound eyes that saw the world in colors humans could not imagine. For 10,000 years, they had devoted themselves to the study of medicine and healing. Their doctors were famous across the galaxy. Their medicines had saved billions of lives on hundreds of worlds. They had no enemies because they helped everyone equally. They had no army because they had never needed one. Now they were dying, and they did not know why. Ambassador stood before the great window of the collective council chamber and watched the city below. The streets that were once full of life were now empty. The markets were closed. The schools were silent. Everywhere, they hid in their homes and waited for death to find them. Was old, even by standards. She had served the collective for over 200 years. She had negotiated treaties with empires and signed trade agreements with federations. She had seen her people through difficult times before, but she had never seen anything like this. The plague killed quickly and painfully. It attacked the nervous system first, causing terrible pain. Then it moved to the respiratory organs, making it impossible to breathe. Most victims died within 3 days of showing symptoms. The doctors worked day and night to find a cure, but the disease was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It seemed almost designed to kill their species specifically. Turned away from the window and looked at the other council members. They were afraid. She could see it in the way their antennae trembled, in the way their eyes refused to meet hers. "We must ask for help," she said. The council was silent. Asking for help was not something they did easily. They were the ones who helped others. They were the ones that other species came to when they were sick or injured. The idea of admitting that they could not save themselves was deeply shameful. "Who would we ask?" said Counselor. "The conquered species are days away, even at maximum speed. By the time they arrive, half our population could be dead." The humans said. The council stirred uncomfortably. The humans were a young species. They had only been part of galactic society for a few hundred years. They were known for many things, but gentleness was not one of them. They fought wars with disturbing frequency. They built weapons of terrible power. They were loud and aggressive and died of old age before they reached 100 years. But they were also the closest trading partners. For decades, the two species had exchanged knowledge. They taught the humans about medicine and biology. The humans taught them about engineering and technology. It was a good relationship, built on mutual respect. And the humans were close. Their nearest colony was only 2 days away at emergency speed. "The humans are not healers," said Counselor. "They are warriors. What could they possibly do for us?" "They have doctors," replied. "They have hospitals. They have ships that can carry supplies quickly, and they are our friends. When we needed rare minerals for our research, they gave them freely. When their colonies were struck by the fever, we sent our best doctors without hesitation. They will not abandon us now." The council debated for hours, but in the end they had no choice. The plague was spreading too fast. Their own resources were exhausted. If they did not get help soon, the species would cease to exist. Returned to her office and composed the message herself. She chose her words carefully, trying to convey the desperation of their situation without seeming weak. "To the United Earth Government," she wrote, "this is Ambassador of the Collective. Our faces a medical emergency of unprecedented scale. A plague of unknown origin is killing our people by the millions. Our doctors cannot find a cure. Our hospitals are overwhelmed. We are dying. We need doctors. We need medicine. We need supplies. Please help us. We do not have much time." She sent the message and waited. What did not know was that thousands of light years away, in a secure military facility on Earth's moon, human intelligence officers had already discovered the truth about the plague. Admiral Helena Vance read the intercepted communications for the third time, her face growing darker with each word. The messages were from the Hegemony, a militaristic empire of reptilian creatures who had conquered 12 species over the past 5 centuries. They were brutal and efficient. They did not fight fair. They did not show mercy. They took what they wanted and destroyed anyone who stood in their way. And they wanted For years, they had tried to acquire medical technology through trade and diplomacy. They had refused. Their healing knowledge was meant to help all species, not to be hoarded by a single empire. They had smiled and nodded and said they understood. Then they had created a bioweapon, specifically designed to kill. The intercepted messages made everything clear. The plague was not natural. It was manufactured in laboratories using genetic samples stolen from hospitals decades ago. They had released it on Prime and were now waiting for it to weaken. In 3 weeks, an invasion fleet would arrive to offer protection to the dying world. The desperate and afraid would have no choice but to accept, and they would finally have what they wanted. Admiral Vance set down the report and looked out at the stars. She was 62 years old and had served in the human military for 40 years. She had fought in 3 wars and commanded ships in a dozen engagements. She had seen the worst that the galaxy had to offer. They had never harmed anyone. They had spent their entire existence trying to help others, and now a species of bullies was going to slaughter them for their knowledge. Not while Helena Vance drew breath. She pressed the communication button on her desk. "Get me the Second Fleet," she said. "Full mobilization, and contact the medical corps. Tell them to prepare every doctor, every nurse, and every supply ship we have. We're going to Prime." She paused, then added, "And tell them to bring their guns. They asked for medical assistance. They're going to get that and more." 3 days passed like 3 years. Ambassador barely slept. She spent her time moving between hospitals, council meetings, and communication centers, waiting for any response from Earth. The plague continued to spread. The death count rose from millions to tens of millions. Entire cities went silent as their populations succumbed to the disease. On the morning of the 4th day, the orbital sensors detected incoming ships. Was in her office when the alert came through. She jumped from her chair and rushed to the window, her heart beating fast with hope. The humans had come. Help was finally here. She ordered all medical teams to gather at the primary spaceport. She sent messages to every hospital, telling them to prepare for incoming supplies. She even allowed herself a moment of relief, thinking that maybe, just maybe, her people would survive this nightmare. The first ship broke through the clouds, and felt her hope turn to confusion. It was not a hospital ship. Hospital ships were white and smooth, designed for comfort and care. This ship was gray and angular, covered in sharp edges and weapons platforms. It was massive, easily 3 kilometers long, bristling with cannon batteries and missile launchers. The word painted on its hull was Defiance. Behind it came another ship, then another, then dozens more. They filled the sky like angry metal clouds blocking out the sun. Their engines roared so loud that windows shook across the city. Their weapons systems hummed with barely contained power. Translator struggled to identify what she was seeing. Her database had limited information on human military vessels, but even she could recognize warships when she saw them. "What is this?" she whispered. A communication came through on the emergency channel. The voice was female, calm and confident. "Ambassador, this is Admiral Helena Vance of the United Earth Navy, commanding the Second Fleet. We received your request for medical assistance. We have brought doctors, medicine, and supplies. We have also brought 37 warships. Please do not be alarmed. You have enemies approaching who do not want you to survive long enough to be cured. We are here to make sure that does not happen." Did not understand. Enemies? What enemies? They had no enemies. They were healers, not warriors, who would want to attack a species devoted to saving lives. "Admiral Vance," she replied, her voice trembling. I do not understand. We asked for medical help, not military intervention. What enemies are you speaking of? There was a pause before the Admiral responded. Ambassador, I would prefer to explain in person. My shuttle will land at your primary spaceport in 20 minutes. Please meet me there. And please keep your people calm. We are here to help, not to conquer. The next hour was chaos. Citizens watched in terror as human warships took up positions throughout their system. These were the largest vessels many of them had ever seen. The humans had always seemed so small, so fragile. How could such a short-lived species build machines of such devastating power? Arrived at the spaceport just as the Admiral's shuttle touched down. It was a small craft, sleek and black, escorted by 4 armed fighters that peeled away once the shuttle was safely on the ground. The rear hatch opened, and a human woman stepped out. Admiral Helena Vance was not what it expected. She was shorter than most humans, with gray hair cut close to her head and deep lines around her eyes. She wore a dark uniform covered in medals and symbols that did not recognize. But her eyes were what caught the ambassador's attention. They were hard and cold, like stones polished by years of difficult decisions. Behind the Admiral came a dozen human soldiers in heavy armor, carrying weapons that looked capable of destroying buildings. They spread out in a protective formation, their eyes scanning the spaceport for threats. Ambassador, the Admiral said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. Thank you for meeting me. I know this must be confusing. Please let me explain. They walked to a nearby building, away from the crowds and cameras. The Admiral's soldiers stayed close, always watching, always ready. Inside, the Admiral sat down and placed a small device on the table. It projected images into the air between them. 3 weeks ago, she said, our intelligence services intercepted communications from the hegemony. Do you know who they are? Nodded slowly. We have had dealings with them. They wanted to purchase our medical technology. We refused. They did not take your refusal well. The Admiral touched the device and new images appeared, documents, genetic sequences, ship movements. The plague killing your people is not natural, Ambassador. It was created in laboratories. They designed it specifically to target biology. They released it on your world and are now waiting for you to weaken. In approximately 18 days, an invasion fleet will arrive. They will offer to help you. They will offer protection. And when you accept, because you will have no choice, they will take everything. Your technology, your knowledge, your freedom. Felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. They had done this. They had murdered millions of innocent people just to steal medical secrets. That cannot be true, she said, though she knew in her heart that it was. I wish it were not, the Admiral replied. But my people have learned to recognize evil when we see it. We have fought it many times in our own history. We know how it operates. Why did you bring warships? Asked. We asked for doctors. Admiral Vance leaned forward. Ambassador, you asked for help. You did not specify what kind. My doctors will work day and night to cure your plague. They are already deploying to your hospitals as we speak. But a cure means nothing if they arrive and slaughter everyone anyway. So I brought the ships that will stop them. You knew, said quietly. You knew about the invasion before we sent our message. We suspected, the Admiral admitted. Your message confirmed our fears. When we received it, I made a decision. They have been good friends to humanity. You have saved countless human lives with your medicine. You have never asked for anything except fair trade and mutual respect. I was not going to let you die because some empire of cowards decided to use disease as a weapon. Looked at the human woman, trying to understand. They had always believed that violence was the last resort of those who lacked intelligence. They had built their entire civilization on the principle of healing, not harming. Yet here was this human, this warrior, who had crossed the stars to protect them with weapons and soldiers. What do you want in return? Asked. Admiral Vance smiled, but it was a sad smile. Nothing, Ambassador. We are not We do not help people so we can take from them. We help people because that is what friends do." She stood and walked to the window. Outside, human medical shuttles were landing across the city, their crews rushing to help wherever they were needed. In orbit, human warships maintained their vigilant watch. "You asked for doctors," Admiral Vance said. "We brought doctors, but we also brought the ships that will make sure those doctors get to finish their work. That is what humanity considers proper assistance. I hope you are not offended." Rose and stood beside the human admiral. For the first time since the plague began, she felt something she had almost forgotten. "Hoping. I am not offended," she said. "I am grateful. But Admiral, your ships are powerful, but they are many. What if you cannot stop them?" Admiral Vance turned to face her. In her eyes saw something she had never seen before in any species. It was not anger or hatred. It was determination, burning like a cold star. "Ambassador," she said, "humanity has been fighting against impossible odds since we climbed down from the trees. We have never let that stop us before. We will not start now." Commander of the Hegemony stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Talon, and watched the stars stretch and blur as his fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Around him, 46 other warships emerged from the darkness of space, their hulls gleaming with fresh war paint. This was the largest invasion force the Hegemony had assembled in decades and was proud to lead it. The conquest of had been his idea. For years, he had argued that diplomacy was a waste of time. The insect creatures would never willingly share their medical secrets. They were too proud, too stubborn, too attached to their foolish ideals about helping everyone equally. The only way to get what the Hegemony needed was to take it by force. But they had friends. They had allies throughout the galaxy who would object to an open invasion. The political consequences would be severe. So had proposed a different approach: create a plague, release it on there, wait for them to weaken, then arrive as saviors, offering protection in exchange for cooperation. By the time the rest of the galaxy realized what had happened, they would already belong to the Hegemony. It was a perfect plan, and today it would reach its perfect conclusion. "Commander," said his sensor officer, a young female named, "I am detecting ships in orbit around Prime." Nodded, he had expected this. They had a small defense force, mostly patrol craft and emergency response vessels. They would pose no threat. "How many?" he asked. His eyes widened. Her scales turned a shade paler. "Commander, I am detecting 37 large vessels. Configuration unknown. They are not." Felt his blood turn cold. Not that was impossible. No one else should be here. The plague had only been active for a few weeks. There had not been enough time for anyone to respond to a distress call. "Identify them," he ordered. Worked her console frantically. After a moment she looked up and saw fear in her eyes. "Commander," she said, "they are human." The bridge fell silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing and turned to look at their commander. The humans were here. The aggressive, unpredictable, dangerous humans. The species that had fought its way into galactic society through sheer stubborn violence. The species that no one fully understood because they died too quickly to study properly. Forced himself to remain calm. This was unexpected, yes, but it did not change anything. The humans were far from their territory. They could not have brought more than a few ships, and even if they had brought more, the fleet was superior in every way. Technology was older and more refined. Warriors were stronger and more disciplined. Ships were built for conquest. "Open a communication channel," ordered. "I will speak to whoever commands these vessels." The flickered and a human face appeared. It was a female, old by human standards, with gray hair and hard eyes. She wore a military uniform covered in decorations. Behind her could see a bridge crew working with quiet efficiency. "This is Commander of the Hegemony," he said, keeping his voice steady and authoritative. "You are interfering in Hegemony business. They have requested our assistance with a medical emergency. We are here to provide aid and protection. Your presence is not required. Withdraw your ships immediately." The human female stared at him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm and cold. "This is Admiral Helena Vance of the United Earth Navy. The requested medical assistance from humanity, not from you. We are providing that assistance. As for your offer of protection, they have declined. They do not need protection from the same people who created the plague that is killing them." Felt his scales flush with anger. How did she know? How could the humans possibly know about the bioweapon? The operation had been conducted in absolute secrecy. "That is a serious accusation," he said carefully. "I demand to know what evidence you have for such a claim." "I have intercepted communications from your own military command," the admiral replied. "I have genetic analysis proving the plague was manufactured using biotechnology. I have ship movement records showing your fleet was mobilized before they even sent their distress call. Would you like me to continue?" His mind raced. This was a disaster. The humans knew everything. If they shared this information with the Galactic Conquered, the hegemony would face sanctions, embargoes, possibly even military action from multiple species. The plan was ruined. Unless the humans never got the chance to share what they knew. "Admiral Vance," said, letting his voice grow harder, "I do not know where you obtained this false information, but it does not matter. The hegemony has committed no crime. We are here on a humanitarian mission. If you do not withdraw your ships within 1 hour, we will be forced to interpret your presence as an act of war." The human admiral did not flinch. She did not look afraid. She looked almost amused. "Commander," she said, "they asked humanity for medical assistance. They are receiving it. They did not ask for your protection, and they will not be receiving it. You have 1 hour to withdraw from this system. After that, we will interpret your presence as hostile." She leaned forward, and her eyes seemed to burn through the. "And Commander, I have read the history of your conquests. I know how you operate. You attack the weak. You prey on the defenseless. You have never faced an enemy that fights back. Today, that changes. If you want you will have to go through the human race to get them. And I promise you that is not a fight you want." The went dark. Stood in silence, his claws digging into the armrests of his command chair. Around him, his officers waited for orders. He could see the doubt in their eyes. The humans were known throughout the galaxy for their ferocity. They were a species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times through war. They understood violence in ways that other species did not. But they were also outnumbered, had 47 warships. The humans had 37, and ships were larger, more heavily armed and crewed by warriors who had trained for combat their entire lives. The humans were merchants and explorers who occasionally played at being soldiers. They could not possibly match military discipline. "All ships," commanded. "Battle formation, charge weapons. We advance in 30 minutes." "Commander," said his first officer, a grizzled veteran named, "are you certain this is wise? The humans have never been defeated in a major engagement. Their reputation." "Their reputation is based on fighting inferior opponents," interrupted. "They have never faced the hegemony. They have never faced me. Today, the galaxy will learn that humans are not as dangerous as they believe." He turned to face his crew. "They have something we need. The humans stand in our way. We will remove them. We will take what we came for, and we will return home as conquerors. This is the way of the hegemony. This is the way it has always been." His officers saluted, though noticed that some of them did not meet his eyes. High above Prime, Admiral Helena Vance watched the fleet begin to move on her tactical display. She had hoped they would be smart enough to withdraw. She had hoped that showing strength would be enough to prevent bloodshed. She should have known better. Bullies never backed down until they were forced to. "All ships," she said quietly. "Battle stations. Weapons free. Today we show the galaxy what humanity does to those who prey on the innocent." The Second Fleet powered up their weapons. Shields hummed to full strength. Crews ran to their positions, and 37 human warships prepared to face 47 vessels in a battle that would change the course of galactic history. Admiral Vance looked out at the stars and thought of the dying on the planet below. Innocent people, healers, friends. "Not today," she whispered. "Not while I still breathe." The first shots were fired at exactly 1400 hours, Galactic Standard Time. Commander had ordered his fleet to advance in a classic wedge formation, with his flagship at the center and his heaviest cruisers protecting the flanks. It was a formation designed to break through enemy lines with overwhelming force. It had worked against 12 different species. It would work against the humans. Or so he believed. The human fleet did not form a defensive line. They did not retreat to protect their medical ships. Instead, they did something that no species had ever done against an attack. They charged. 37 human warships accelerated directly toward the formation, their engines burning bright against the darkness of space. They came in fast and hard, weapons firing before they were even in optimal range. Missiles streaked through the void. Energy beams cut through the vacuum. The space between the two fleets became a storm of fire and light. The returned fire, their superior weapons tearing into the advancing human ships. Hull plating melted, armor cracked. Several human vessels took critical damage in the first exchange, but they did not stop. They did not slow down. They kept coming, firing everything they had, closing the distance with suicidal determination. Watched in disbelief as the human ship slammed into his formation like a fist through glass. They did not fight like any enemy he had ever faced. They did not try to preserve their ships. They did not fall back when damaged. They pushed forward, always forward, targeting engines and weapon systems with devastating accuracy. The battle became chaos. The UES Defiance, Admiral Vance's flagship, cut through the line like a blade through flesh. Captain, commanding from the bridge, directed his ship with the precision of a surgeon and the fury of a storm. His gunners targeted the weak points in armor that human intelligence had identified years ago. His pilots flew with a recklessness that bordered on madness. "Target their command ship," Admiral Vance ordered. "Cut off the head and the body will fall." The Defiance turned toward the Crimson Talon's flagship. 3 cruisers moved to intercept, their weapons blazing. The Defiance took hit after hit. Fires broke out across multiple decks. Crew members died at their stations, but Captain did not deviate from his course. "All forward batteries," he commanded. "Fire." The Defiance unleashed everything it had. Missiles, energy weapons. The concentrated firepower tore through the first cruiser, reducing it to burning debris. The second cruiser tried to dodge, but human targeting systems tracked it with inhuman precision. It exploded in a ball of white fire. The third cruiser rammed the Defiance. The impact was catastrophic. The Defiance's forward section crumpled like paper. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically, but hundreds of crew members were killed instantly. Captain was thrown from his chair, his arm broken, his face covered in blood. "Damage report," he gasped. "Forward weapons are gone," his first officer replied, her voice tight with pain. "Engines at 40%. Life support failing on decks 3 through 7. We have maybe 20 minutes before total structural failure." Pulled himself back into his chair. Through the crack he could see the Crimson Talon, still intact, still commanding the fleet. If that ship survived, they could still win. They could still take Prime. They could still murder the... "All remaining power to engines," ordered. "Set collision course for the flagship." His crew looked at him. They knew what he was asking. They knew they would not survive. "Captain," his first officer said quietly, "are you sure?" Thought of his daughter, back on Earth. He thought of the children he had seen in the hospitals, their small bodies racked with pain from a disease they did not deserve. He thought of all the species throughout the galaxy who would watch this battle, and decide whether humans were worth trusting. "I am sure," he said. "Today we show them what humanity is made of." The Defiance turned toward the Crimson Talon. Its engines, damaged but still functional, pushed the massive ship forward, saw what was happening and screamed at his helmsman to evade, but it was too late. The Defiance was too close, moving too fast. Captain stood on his dying bridge and watched the enemy flagship grow larger in his. Around him, his crew held their stations. No one ran. No one cried. They were human and they were not afraid. "For Earth," said, for everyone." The Defiance struck the Crimson Talon at full speed. The explosion lit up the sky above Prime. Citizens across the planet looked up and saw a new star burning where two great ships had destroyed each other. They did not know what it meant. They did not know that Captain and his entire crew had just given their lives to kill a monster. But the battle was not over. Admiral Vance, who had transferred to the UES Valor before the final attack, watched the Crimson Talon die. She felt grief for and his crew, but there was no time for mourning. The fleet was in chaos, their commander dead, their formation shattered. But they still had ships, they still had weapons, and they were starting to regroup. "All ships," she commanded, "press the attack, do not give them time to recover." The human fleet obeyed. Damaged ships that should have retreated instead pushed forward. Crews who had lost half their friends kept fighting. Captains who were wounded refused to leave their bridges. The humans fought like demons, like they had nothing to lose, like death itself could not stop them. They had never seen anything like it. One by one, ships began to flee. First the smaller vessels, then the cruisers, then even the heavy battleships. They broke formation and ran, their crews desperate to escape the nightmare that the humans had become. His first officer tried to rally them, but no one listened. The humans had killed their commander. The humans had turned their perfect plan into ash. The humans were not supposed to be this strong. 9 hours after the first shot was fired, it was over. The fleet was destroyed. Of 47 ships that had arrived to conquer Prime, only 6 escaped. The rest were debris, scattered across the system like broken toys. The human fleet had paid dearly for this victory. 7 ships were gone completely, including the Defiance. 14 more were so badly damaged they would never fly again. Over 4,000 human soldiers had died defending a planet that was not their own, protecting a species they barely knew. On the surface of Prime, they emerged from their shelters. They looked up at the sky and saw burning wreckage falling like rain. They saw human ships, battered and broken, still maintaining their positions in orbit. They saw medical shuttles, somehow untouched by the battle, continuing to land and deliver supplies. Ambassador stood in the streets of city and wept. She wept for the humans who had died. She wept for her own people who were still dying from the plague. She wept because she had never imagined that any species would sacrifice so much for strangers. Around her, citizens began to gather. They watched the sky in silence, trying to understand what had happened. For 10,000 years, they had believed that violence was wrong, that war was always a failure of intelligence. But today, violence had saved them. Today, warriors had protected them when their healing could not protect itself. A human soldier walked past, her armor scorched and dented, her face covered in soot. She was heading toward a hospital where human doctors were still working to find a cure. She was injured, exhausted, and clearly in pain. But she did not stop. She did not rest. Reached out and touched the soldier's arm. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you do this for us?" The soldier looked at her with tired eyes. "Because you needed help," she said simply, "and because we could." Then she continued walking, leaving standing alone in the street, watching the stars fall. Above Prime, Admiral Helena Vance stood on the bridge of the Valor and counted the cost. 7 ships, 4,000 lives, friends she had known for decades, gone in an instant. But they were safe, they were defeated, and across the galaxy, every species with eyes and ears would learn what had happened here today. Humanity did not abandon its friends. Humanity did not surrender to evil, and humanity would pay any price, bear any burden to protect those who could not protect themselves. Admiral Vance allowed herself one moment of grief. Then she straightened her uniform and returned to work. There was still a plague to cure. The cure came 3 weeks after the battle. Human doctors working alongside scientists finally cracked the genetic code of the bioweapon. They created a treatment that stopped the plague in its tracks. Within days, the dying stopped. Within weeks, the sick began to recover. Within months, the plague was nothing more than a terrible memory. They would survive. Ambassador stood on a balcony overlooking city, watching her people return to life. The streets were full again. Markets had reopened. Children played in the parks, their laughter echoing through neighborhoods that had been silent for so long. Below her, human soldiers patrolled the streets. They were no longer there to fight. They were there to help distribute medicine, repair infrastructure, and protect supply lines. They worked side by side with citizens, communicating through translators, building friendships that would last generations. Admiral Vance found on the balcony. The human woman looked older than she had when she arrived. The battle and its aftermath had taken a toll on her. There were new lines on her face, new shadows in her eyes. "Ambassador," she said, "I wanted to inform you that the last of our medical teams will be departing tomorrow. The cure has been distributed to all population centers. Your doctors have been trained in its production. You no longer need us." Turned to face her. "Admiral, I need to ask you something. It has been troubling me since the battle." "Ask." "Why did you come?" said. "The truth. We sent a message asking for doctors and medicine. We did not ask for warships. We did not ask for your soldiers to die for us. Why did you bring them?" Admiral Vance was quiet for a long moment. She looked out at the city, at the going about their lives, at the human soldiers helping wherever they could. "Ambassador," she finally said, "when I was a young girl, my grandmother told me a story. During one of humanity's great wars, there was a village being attacked by an army. The villagers sent a message to their allies asking for food and medicine. They were starving. They were sick. They needed help to survive." She paused. Their allies received the message. They could have sent food. They could have sent medicine. Instead, they sent soldiers. They sent weapons. They sent everything they had, because they understood that food and medicine would mean nothing if the village was destroyed before the supplies arrived. Listened carefully. "The village survived," Admiral Vance continued. "Not because of the food or the medicine, but because someone was willing to stand between them and the people trying to kill them. My grandmother said that was the day she understood what it meant to truly help someone. It meant seeing the whole problem, not just the part they could put into words." She turned to face directly. "You asked for medical assistance, Ambassador, and we brought medical assistance. But we also saw the whole problem. We saw the plague. We saw what would happen if we only gave you half of what you needed, so we brought everything." Felt her eyes grow wet. "Your people died for us, Captain, his crew, thousands of others. They gave their lives for a species they barely knew. How can we ever repay such a debt?" Admiral Vance smiled, but it was a sad smile, full of memories and loss. "There is no debt," she said. "This is not how humanity thinks about help. We do not help people so they will owe us something. We help people because they need help, because it is right, because we would want someone to do the same for us." She put her hand on his arm. "Ambassador, I have read about history. Your species has spent 10,000 years helping others. You have sent doctors to planets in crisis. You have cured diseases that threatened entire civilizations. You have never asked for anything in return. You did these things because you believed it was right." She looked into his eyes. "We are the same. We just help in different ways. Your way is through healing. Our way is through protection. But the heart of it is identical. We see suffering and we cannot look away. We see injustice and we cannot stay silent. We see friends in danger and we cannot abandon them. Bowed her head. I believed that violence was always wrong. That war was a failure of civilization. But your soldiers saved my people through violence. Your warriors protected us through war. I do not know how to reconcile this with everything I believed. Perhaps, Admiral Vance said gently, the truth is more complicated than what you were taught. Perhaps there are times when violence is not a failure, but a necessity, when the only way to protect the innocent is to stand against those who would harm them, when peace can only be preserved by those willing to fight for it. She looked up at the sky, where human ships still maintained their patrol. Humanity learned this lesson the hard way. We have fought each other for most of our history. We have done terrible things in the name of fear and hatred and greed. But we have also fought to protect each other, to save each other, to ensure that the good and gentle have a chance to survive in a universe that is not always good and gentle. She returned her gaze too. They are healers. You save lives. That is your gift to the galaxy. But sometimes, Ambassador, saving lives requires more than medicine. Sometimes it requires someone willing to stand in front of the bullets so the doctors can do their work. That is humanity's gift. We are the shield that protects the healers. Was silent for a long time. Below them, the city continued its recovery. Human and worked together, building something new from the ashes of tragedy. What will happen now? She finally asked. They will not forget what happened here. They will want revenge. Admiral Vance nodded. They will, and when they come, humanity will be ready. We have already sent word to our government. The collective will be placed under human protection. Any attack against your people will be considered an attack against ours. You would go to war again for us. As many times as necessary. Admiral Vance's voice was firm and certain. They asked humanity for help. You are our friends now, and humanity does not abandon its friends. Looked at this strange human woman. This warrior who had crossed the stars to protect healers. This soldier who had sacrificed so much for a species she barely knew. And she understood, finally, why humanity was so respected and feared throughout the galaxy. It was not because humans were strong. It was not because they built powerful weapons or flew fast ships. It was because when humans called someone a friend, they meant it with their entire being. They would fight for their friends. They would die for their friends. They would move stars and shatter empires for their friends. They had asked for doctors. They had received doctors, but they had also received protectors, guardians, soldiers willing to give everything so that healers could do their sacred work. Thank you, said, for everything. Admiral Vance clasped her hand. Thank you for trusting us. Thank you for being worth protecting. 1 year later, they unveiled a new research station, the largest in their history. They named it the Helena Vance Memorial Institute, after the admiral who had retired shortly after the battle to spend her remaining years with her family on Earth. The station's motto, carved in 100 languages above its main entrance, became famous across the galaxy. Ships passing through the system would slow down just to read it. Diplomats quoted it in speeches. Children learned it in schools. The words were simple, but they contained the truth of what had happened at Prime. They asked for doctors, humanity answered. And across the stars, species who had once dismissed humans as violent and primitive began to understand the truth. Humans were violent, yes. They carried war in their blood and fire in their hearts, but they used that violence to protect the innocent. They turned that fire against those who preyed on the weak. Humanity was dangerous, but they were dangerous in the way that a parent is dangerous when their child is threatened, in the way that a friend is dangerous when someone they love is in trouble. The hegemony never recovered from the Battle of Prime. Their reputation was destroyed. Their power was broken. Within a decade, their empire had collapsed, torn apart by the very species they had once conquered. They flourished. Protected by humanity, supported by friends across the galaxy, They continued their work of healing and helping. They built hospitals on 1,000 worlds. They cured diseases that had plagued civilizations for centuries. They became greater than they had ever been before. And they never forgot who had saved them. They never forgot that, when they had asked for help, humanity had answered with everything they had. They never forgot that sometimes the best medicine is someone willing to fight for you.